Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the Rattlecast. We're the biggest freewheeling live stream poetry podcast on the planet, in your ears and on your laptops. Our guest for episode number 339 is Daniel Donaghy. He'll be here in a few minutes, but before we get into it, say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been a continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. I know you do too, so please do click on that like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Wherever you can do to help spread poetry around the internet would be much appreciated. Now, we're going to start out with our Poets Respond poet. And we have Khushrooh Kashi here, all the way from Pakistan. And Khushrooh, I'm hearing a little bit of sound back in my, which I wasn't hearing before, in my headphone. Do you have the YouTube stream open or something like that you could close? Okay, well, we'll try to make sure that doesn't happen. I got it on mute, so I'll just ask you, and then I'll unmute you so it doesn't do the feedback thing. So tell us a little bit first how this poem came to be, why you decided to write this, and what you were thinking as you entered this poem, and why you chose to write it, and then we'll ask you to read it too.
This poem is actually about the Islamabad Accord, which was a 45-day peace deal that was brokered by Pakistan for the USA and Iran. As soon as news broke out, everyone in Pakistan was so happy and they were so excited, and there was just a sense of pride in the air. And whether it was Pakistanis that lived in Pakistan or it was Pakistanis that lived abroad, everyone was happy to see Pakistan recognized globally in such a positive way. And for days, there was so much excitement in the air. But then, as soon as you'd leave home, you'd see other stuff. You'd stand at the butcher shop and you would hear people that would buy meat only once a month because they couldn't afford it. And you'd see delivery drivers that didn't have any shoes. And I'm speaking all this from personal experience. And it just broke your heart because as Pakistanis, we have such a sense of pride for our country. We are so patriotic. We have so much pride for our culture, for our heritage, for our history. But then when you see this stuff, it really breaks your heart because it's really sad to see. It's really depressing to see. And it really makes you realize that every country is developing and there's still so much room to grow, so much space to grow.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks so much for giving us that insight. You know, it's always so interesting to hear voices from all over the world, and especially places, you know, like Pakistan where things are going on right now. And it's really interesting to hear your perspective. I was curious too, you know, how long have you been writing poetry? Because it is such a wonderfully vivid poem that you wrote here.
I've been writing poetry, I think as soon as I can remember, actually, like since I was like maybe 9 or 10 years old.
Yeah, well, why
But
don't you go
then
ahead?
this was the first time I actually tried to publish.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. It's always, we love doing that too. It's so great to have first-time poets and be able to share it, especially with such a wide audience too. Do you want to go ahead and read your poem? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. World leaders praise Pakistan as a mediator. The words run like a pulse across the screen, and the barbershop smells like rusted razor blades. I fondly run my fingers over the green flag propped on the table until, click, the room goes dark and the words on the television disappear. Arey Baba, the barber says, and lights a kerosene lamp. We are a nuclear power that works in candlelight. One step out and I'm mediating between salt and flour. Will we have enough roti this week? I stop by the mechanic, whose arthritic fingers shake with grease. The radio hums our soul is sacred. His smile is bittersweet. He is the father of a martyr. The news headlines end and he wipes his hands for lunch. His dal is watered. I come home to find 5 gulab jamun our neighbors have sent. I give them to my son as the hunger starts to chew. The kitchen is cold and the floor is empty. I weigh the grains, wash the pot, reach for the stove. It won't light. The pipe is empty. We cannot eat our soil.
Yeah, that is such a beautiful poem, and so telling too. I
Thank you.
love the opportunity to use poetry as journalism and just share insights from all over the place. Khushrooh, thanks so much for being a guest and for joining us. I know it's so early there where you are, so I appreciate you getting up early and talking to us today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. It's such an amazing opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely our pleasure. Thanks again. Yeah. So once again, that was Khushrooh from Pakistan with World Leaders Praise Pakistan as a Mediator. The headline there, turning into a poem. That was a Poet Respond poem, our poem of the week. We have a new poem every Sunday on Poet Respond. And if you'd like to submit yours, anything about current events applies, all you have to do is email it to, not email it, send it to rattle.com. Go to rattle.com. Up in the content, you will see Poet Respond as a category. You'll find the link there to send your submission. Send them by midnight Friday night to have your poems considered for the Sunday Poets Respond Poem of the Week. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Daniel Donaghy. So sit tight and we'll be right back with a whole lot more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Daniel Donaghy. He's the author of 5 poetry collections, most recently Somerset, which was named co-winner of the 2019 Paterson Poetry Prize. His previous collections include Start with the Trouble and Streetfighting, a Paterson Poetry Prize finalist. He earned a BA in English from Kutztown University, an MA in English in creative writing from Hollins College, an MFA in creative writing poetry from Cornell University, and a PhD in English from my own alma mater, the University of Rochester. Donaghy was awarded the 2022 Auburn Witness Poetry Prize, the 2019 Artist Fellowship in the Connecticut Office of the Arts. He's a professor of English at Eastern Connecticut State University, where he edits Here, a poetry journal with his students, and serves as Poet Laureate of Windham, Connecticut. He grew up in Kensington section of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which has inspired many of his poems. And here he is, Daniel Donaghy. Hey, Daniel, it's great to see you.
Hey, Tim, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's definitely my pleasure. And definitely, I had no idea that you went through the University of Rochester, too. So you had James Longenbach, and I saw him there blurbing your first books. What was the first book? Oh, Streetfighting. And yeah. So really cool to see that.
Yeah, he's really very nice and supportive up there. go Yellow Jackets, right? And I don't know how many other people go to a university. It's such a beautiful campus, but it gets so awful in the winter where literally there are underground tunnels to go from building to
Oh,
building.
they're definitely the tunnels. I kind of forgot
So
about that actually. Yeah.
yeah, well, you
Um,
block it out, But despite that, it is a great place, and yeah, and Jim Longabaug's a wonderful critic and poet. Um,
yeah. Well, do you want to start out with a poem from that book, Street Fighting? And
yeah, sure.
yeah, it's a great poem to kick off sort of the style of poetry you do, I think.
Okay, this is a poem called George, and just to it being in communication with you, Tim, and with anybody who's watching this, that, like the idea of thinking, teaching my students anything we read can be a writing prompt. Read like a writer. You're looking to kind of fill the well in that way, and like we all have those people who were our teachers when we were children, and they didn't realize they were teaching us anything. Maybe didn't think they were capable of teaching anybody anything, but that was definitely the case with this a person in my neighborhood and named George, and that's the title of this poem. We saw him every day, shooting foul shots, layups, jumpers from the key. His tattooed arms a blur when he dribbled behind his back or between his thick legs. His headband soaked, t-shirt yellow with sweat by 8 a.m. when we passed him on our way to school, fixing our clip-on ties so we could look good for Angel, Annie, and Diane. He mumbled to himself, shouted sometimes. All of us stopping to hear him call the last seconds of a game, the setup always the same. 3 seconds left, his team down one. The right side cleared out so he could take his guy to the hole. His thin lips, a line of concentration, head up, shoulders faking one way, then another. His eyes always clear so early in the morning. Before he loaded trucks at Strathman's Lumber, before he smoked pot at lunch and came home to two kids who weren't his, before she slapped more bills onto the kitchen table, his rough hands steady, his spin quick into the lane for a backdoor pass on a pick and roll, his man blocked off, his whole world blocked off, while he went strong to the hoop, unstoppable, rising up to seal another win. His sweet finger roll, one perfect thing he could do.
Yeah, that's such a great poem. That was George from Street Fighting, a tribute to George himself, a real person there where he grew up, Daniel. And, where you grew up, Kensington, and it's a suburb of Philadelphia, a tough one, is so much a part of your work and what makes you sort of tick as a poet. What was it like growing up there, and how did you discover poetry along the way?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Kensington is it's in North Philadelphia. It's technically one of the river wards. So we've got the river down this side. You've got the L, literally 180 feet from my house. You've got a railroad tracks coming here. So there's a lot of people in motion, and 95 down by the river. So there's a lot of people in motion going all of these interesting and exciting places, and kind of there you are. There was once upon a time in Kensington, mills on just about every corner. It was called the warehouse of the world. There were hosiery mills and all kinds of different thread mills and rug mills. The Stetson hat up on Stetson Avenue, that's where it was made in Kensington. I came up though after all those glory days, and there were a lot of row homes that were built because there was such a demand at one time for workers to be working in these factories. By the time I got there, all those things were gone. And what I can say about growing up in Kensington is it was the most interesting place that clearly I will ever live. Working class, the working poor. But it wasn't until I moved out that I ever needed to call a plumber or an electrician or a welder or a contractor or somebody to do to pour cement for your front steps or your sidewalk. Because there was somebody's dad who did that, and who would do that if you didn't have money. They'd do it for a meal, and a six-pack of beer. So I grew up in a place where nobody had a whole lot. But I think it was really the last wave of before the total fracturing of neighborhoods, where everybody knew each other's business for better or for worse. You knew who people were for better or for worse, but there was also, a lot of camaraderie that I think that came through when you needed it. Also led to the book's called Streetfighting. After all, led to unfortunate things too. But when I think back on those days, I think back among the many emotions, and there is fortunate because I'll never run out of stories and some interesting people to write about. But I was not on a path toward writing growing up there. I didn't know anybody who had gone to college. A couple people right below me, maybe right above me, were good enough at soccer to go to college. They could have gone, but it just didn't work out. There wasn't really a path toward college. So I can't say I grew up in a world of academics, and I certainly didn't grow up in a world of where surrounded by readers. But what I did grow up around from all of these aforementioned people, the dads who would come home, the moms, everybody sitting on their front steps, is I don't come necessarily from authors, but I come from really powerful storytellers, bullshitters, as we call them. You own the front stoop and you got a six pack and you're the hero of every story. And oh man, Vern's going off on a tangent again. So the power that stories had to command a moment, was something I learned very early on. But I didn't really see myself reflected in that. I read all the time, all the Hardy Boys books, all the sports biographies, and Mark Twain, etc. But where poetry came into my life was when I went. Now, you have a background in molecular biology.
Yeah, that's what I was doing at the University of Rochester. And then I took a James Longenbach's class as an elective. And I liked writing. I read a lot too, and I thought maybe I'd be a science fiction writer or something on the side, but it wasn't anything my plan to be a poet. And I thought I'd take it to spice up my writing and become a better writer. And I just started really enjoying poems thanks to Jim. So yeah, totally.
That's amazing. So there you are, molecular biology. I went in Philly to a magnet high school, which just was going to, give me certainly a better education than some of the local schools. And I went to the high school for engineering and science on my way to be a physics major. So it's funny that we started off way over here, and now I don't even remember. I can't even see that side of the street from here anymore.
Really?
But anyway, random how life brings you what you're supposed to do. I'm sitting there in 10th grade. I think poetry's stupid. It's these dead white guys writing all these cryptic things, and I have to write a paper, and I don't want to. And does anybody want to go, instead of English class tomorrow, do you want to go see this visiting poet? And I'm like, yes, yeah, count me in. And for whatever reason, didn't pick everybody, but said, okay, Donaghy, you can go. And it was Etheridge Knight. Etheridge Knight came to my high school. And we went from this esoteric kind of poetry as I remember it. Although I say I don't remember it, but I remember the day before we had studied E. Cummings' poem Plato Told. So part of me was working up there. But and I saw Etheridge Knight came in, didn't have any poems with him, sat on one of those hard plastic chairs. We all sat on the floor, crisscross applesauce. And the first words I ever heard by a poet who wrote them himself, where he started with Hard Rock returns to prison for the hospital for the criminal insane. And he looks at us and he leans down, very nice man, very, very skinny guy. And he says, Hard Rock was known not to take no shit from nobody. And he had the scars to prove it. And I was like, what is this? Give me more of this. Why aren't we studying this in class, And that was it. It was that idea of, wow, there are people writing those urgent stories who've been through it and survived. And then I find out his first book's called Poems from Prison. So I think it's bad in Kensington. This dude went to prison. And I learned the circumstances of coming out from the war. And he got into, poetry saved his life, And so that's kind of how it got started, the relationship between poetry and urgent stories. That's sort of, I loved Etheridge and read everything he had done, and then just kind of kept chasing down that hole. And then at Kutztown University, I had the great opportunity to study with a poet named Harry Humes. 14 books, and I can say Harry passed away last April 4th, but we were working together he sort of at the end of his cognitive life, we were working on his new and selected poems. And then at one point, just took over the manuscript. So that'll be out in the fall, shameless plug. November 3rd, Election Day. We're all going to vote, right? Um, it's called Going Across the Water, the New and Selected Poems of Harry Humes. And that'll be out from Ohio University Press. So I walked into Harry's class, and then he said, write about somebody you know, right? Tell an interesting story of somebody, try to capture them in that essence. And like George would have been good for that assignment, right? Trying to capture somebody in that, the one telling gesture, one telling example of their activities. And I wrote about my dad, and my dad being violent toward my mother. And I'd never told anybody this, but I don't know. I trusted this dude. And then I turn it in, and physics is going, but he says, Donaghy, asked me to stick around after class. And I said, I'm going in for extra physics help. Now the poetry isn't going well. Where am I going? But it was just quite the opposite. He was very supportive. And he said, hey, if you want to write about, troubled dads, here are 12 poets you need to be reading, right? It's like, and then the story when the things that you're interested in, and then you start reading that other people have written about a lot worse than you've been through. It's like you were part of a conversation, but you didn't know the other people talking. And it's been a great journey toward that end of just continuing to find people who use poetry in that way to make sense of their lives.
Yeah, that's a great story as far as the origin. I wonder, our prompt for this week at the second half of the show is about the trajectories of your life and how there's certain like pivot points where it shifts. And I just wonder, because I wonder this about myself too. Like, do you think you would have discovered poetry if Etheridge Knight hadn't decided to come to your school, which is an amazing thing to do, to come to a school like that? Do you think you would be a poet still? Was it something that was like latent inside of you that you would have discovered eventually, do you think? Or do you think it was something that just sparked that wouldn't have been like this fire that it became?
Well, I think that's 10th grade. And then that's sort of planted. And then nobody comes 11th and 12th grade, right? But it's like I remember meeting Etheridge Knight and reading him. But then there weren't other poets after that. And it was just sort of, I got to Kutztown and then took poetry writing. And it was because of Etheridge Knight. So the answer is absolutely not. If that seed weren't planted, I wouldn't have known it was possible. I would have thought poetry was just that thing with a capital P. I tell my students all the time that I was that kid in high school, like, ooh, ooh. And then I know what that metaphor means. I know the hidden symbolism. And it's like, no, Dan, close. And then they go, Tim, yes, exactly, Tim. Exactly. That's it. And I spent most of my time almost getting it. And that's kind of like how I felt about that poetry. Yeah, I call it poetry with a capital P. But beyond the chance meeting of getting to see Etheridge Knight read and just that crazy moment. So, and I threw it away because, you do this when you move, but he didn't have copies of his books, but we had the purple mimeographed copies of his poems to read along while he was reading. And he wrote, to Bro Dan on it and signed his name. It's like, damn it, I wish I had that now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the big thing that changed that says that there's no way I would have done this was meeting Harry Humes at Kutztown. First generation, coming back from the service, right? He could use the GI Bill, going to college. He writes a lot about the coal region, the anthracite coal region of Pennsylvania, writes about the horrors he saw with his dad working in mines, and also the beauty of the landscape that hadn't been desecrated by the mining industry. And just this like straight shooter, no BS. He saw who I was, and all my confusion and imperfection and anxiety. And I think just that was the place that said, hey, you could do this. And but I've seen it. If you walk into a different poetry room, it could be a whole different aesthetic. And I've been in workshops since, and some things I write, I'm all in, like if something comes up, I'm gonna tap into it and see where it goes. And sometimes, well, all the time, I'm really surprised by what comes out. And you've been in workshops where the people, the other people in the room are uncomfortable. It's like, this is a little messy. This is like a real issue. Luckily, I just had a guy who came from the lower class, could see the connection between writing and power and giving you access toward a world beyond the one you came up in. So yeah, I think absolutely not, because I'm a terribly frustrated musician, Tim. I don't know if do you play an instrument?
Yeah, I have the same. I'm a frustrated guitarist. I have the same right next to me, right here. The
Oh,
same
I'll have to
same
rock out.
capo, the same.
That's
I know some chords.
well, there you go. See, if I, that's what I'd be doing if I had it, if I could sing or play music. But so I just try to make the music I can with the energy that I have, But I just to wrap up, I put a button on that. Um, Quote all the time the gospel of Bruce Springsteen. And there's an interview when he was promoting the Tunnel of Love album in 1987. And Kurt Loder, remember him? He
Hmm.
was ubiquitous at one point. He was everywhere, doing these cool interviews, totally unimpressed with David Bowie. It was all he had that vibe. But he says, like, what would you have done if you didn't find music? And Springsteen's like, oh, I was this kid. I just had all this energy and I needed a place to put it.
Hmm.
Luckily, I picked this thing up and it's worked out well for me. And then he did that underbite, cackle laugh. But I remember being 17 when I saw that, going, yeah, that's me. What the hell's next, Bruce? What am I supposed to do? Because you need to put it somewhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, Harry pointed me down the road and haven't looked back.
Yeah, well, it's amazing to think about that. The Etheridge and the Harry. Etheridge in particular had no idea that one day meant so much to you that it just
Yeah.
changed, and then all your students. There's just this like domino effect of ripples down the line. It's really cool to think about. Well, let's read another poem. Let's do, and it's another one that would have worked for that early prompt for Mikey, who danced in the rain.
Yeah. It's for Mikey who danced in the rain, a neighborhood guy, met an early end. And coming up in the city, um, if anybody watching or whoever sees this, growing up in a working class or working poor environment, some people slip away. And unfortunately, Mikey was one of those people, but not in this moment. In this moment, he's perfect. It's called For Mikey Who Danced in the Rain. Oh, I should say, there's a reference in here to Rocky's house. Um, I cannot overstate the identity Philadelphia takes from all of the positive characteristics of Rocky Balboa, to the point where if you go to Google Maps and you look up the 1800 block of East Tusculum Street in Philadelphia, which is one block up from Lehigh Avenue, Rocky's house is on Google Maps today, like Stallone lives there. Some poor person, somebody lives there, gets up, goes to work, and is in that little two-story house. But that's not their house. It's on the Google Maps as Rocky's house. So it's literally the house that Rocky Balboa lived in the 1976 movie. And we take great pride that that film was made one block from my house. For Mikey Who Danced in the Rain. I watched from the front window of our second floor apartment as the storm swept toward us down Clearfield and Ruth Streets, over Rocky's house on Tusculum, finally thumping Lehigh Ave with an angry sheet of rain. I heard our neighbor's boyfriend Mikey before I saw him, cheering under our shared awning, then sprinting into what sounded like static, calling our block to join him, a stranger to most of them, shirtless, probably high, boxers riding the waistband of his pre-grunge shredded jeans. I wouldn't have said it then, but in that moment, he was beautiful, free of fucks for anyone who stayed inside and watched him spin and stomp within a wall of water too thick to drive through, every muscle in his bony chest and stomach taut, his long, dirty blonde hair twirling with him on that once or twice a summer evening when for 20 minutes the sky breaks open and lightning splits the clouds between thunderclaps over the railroad and L tracks and shuttered Y, and then is gone. Like Mikey was gone after that night on Albert Street. Like I and everyone we knew is gone from that block that's now a tent city of empty houses, empty lots, and boarded houses. Heavy rain still brings Mikey back. Brings back Philly and my parents younger than I am now. Brings back friends who didn't even make it to Mikey's age, 22. And the storms that somehow missed me, but swept them one by one, fighting, swearing, middle fingers raised into the dark.
Yeah, that was Daniel Donaghy reading for Mikey, who danced in the rain. That was from a forthcoming book, Row Home and Flickering Lights. You mentioned, that your poetry is inspired by the storytelling on porches, and I'm wondering, you do have that sense of, a performance aspect in the oral storytelling going on. Like there's a sort of a beginning and a middle and end. We're on a journey with you in these poems, exploring a topic, or in these first two, we heard a character. And I'm wondering how you approach a poem. Like how much has that informed that storytelling, those elements? Because one of the things is, one of the things you need in oral storytelling is you need people to be able to follow along. And that's something that we so often don't see in contemporary poetry. And the critique of the week on Fridays, I'm constantly saying that's a great line, but I have no idea what this poem is about, And
Right?
and you can't do that when you're on the porch telling a story to somebody. It makes no sense. So I'm just really interested in how you approach a poem, given that background and the aims that you have.
Yeah, I think, thank you for that question. I am fully invested and I'm committed to the notion that writing is a physical activity. And Terrence Hayes, who does everything right. I just love Terrence Hayes for so much of what he does. And I'm going to get the quote wrong, but what he says that, when we read a poem, what we're really doing, that the words are the vehicle to get us from A to B, but what you're really moved by is the energy underneath the words. And our job is to pay attention to those pulses underneath the words while we're also layering and ratcheting and looking for music and using repetition and after using any poetic tool we have to ratchet up the stakes and create that intensity and that urgency. But I started out, I wanted to write about Mikey. He died tragically. And I'd written about that in a poem called Pietà in Start with the Trouble. The depiction of, it's all there. It's a sad story. But I don't want that to be the only thing that I ever wrote about it, and there was another time where he was really high on a street corner and my friend and I were going, there was this guy had a pickup truck of scrap metal, and in the back of the truck were like 2 or 3 old bicycles, and we didn't have bikes. And we're like, we can get those bikes, we'll fix them up. We'll go to Richie's bike shop. And blah, blah, blah. And I remember seeing Mikey on the corner and he said, I'm not going to tell on you, but if you take them, you got to live with that. And we didn't take them. It's like those little Buddhas, that come. But so you start writing, and I ask my students and anybody who asks for writing advice, like how you get from A to B, how you discover the subject, is really to go back to Richard Hugo in Triggering Town and that essay, writing. My gosh, what is it called? Writing, not to find the subject. It's driving me crazy now.
Oh yeah, I can't. It's on the tip of my tongue too. We've
Yeah,
talked
writing off the subject. Writing off
There
the
you go.
subject.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where there's the triggering subject was, I want to write about that day Mikey's in the rain. And that's boring. There he is, and he's there. And it's like, what is that? Because then it's something else that happens, And I'm there and I'm thinking about why it's important. And there I am up there in that house, in that apartment with all kinds of stuff happening that comes up in other poems in the books. But just that moment of grace. And then you want to hold somebody in that grace. And then how can you do that? What tools can I use to just kind of freeze that moment? And then the discovered subject. Hugo says there's the triggering subject, and you write to find the discovered subject. And the mistake that young poets can make, and please, I still make it all the time, is you stay too long on the beginning subject. It's like, Dan, you got Mikey, he's soaked. What else is he doing? What else is there, right? Mm-hmm. Something else has to happen. Like George, he talks to himself and plays basketball, but what else? There's just something about the beauty that I took away from that was a challenge to me. I wasn't that great at anything. I wanted to be great at something, and watching him, it gave me that. He didn't know it, but gave me that challenge. And so it's the germ of the excitement, the story, the mystery, and something gnaws at me,
Hmm.
and I want to find out what it is, and I tend to dive in and see what happens, and it's always a surprise to me of where things end up. But then I love that whenever I can quote Aristotle, I feel a lot smarter. Again, it's the Kensington kid coming out of me, but Aristotle, the ending has to be surprising yet inevitable, right? And Robert Frost says the delight comes in knowing, the delight in writing comes in his essay, A Figure of Poem Makes, comes when we say something we didn't know we knew. And I just keep writing until there's that surprise and
Hmm.
that I can't quite quantify. But but it's very physical, very physical. I walk around, I talk to myself. And
Yeah,
it's just,
yeah, exactly. There is that like why did that thought? Like why is this something that I'm remembering? And there's something beneath that. There's something that makes that a thing that has meaning to you, and then mining that and bringing that to the surface is always what we do. And then it's a bodily thing. It's just something we know in ourselves, and bringing that out and giving that words that we can speak is what poetry is all about. So really well said.
so
Let's do
have you
another
had
poem.
that?
This is yeah.
But if I could just throw it back, because uh, have you had that moment where I I'm writing, you're writing about something, you don't even know why you want to write about it, but you have to write about it. Have
Hmm.
you had that feeling yourself?
Oh yeah, that's the only way I write. It's like I find run off with something, and there's like some reason. And I assume there's a reason, and then at the end you find the reason. If you don't find the reason, then it's not a poem. That's kind of how I
Right.
think about it. And
Yeah,
it may
right.
this went nowhere, but maybe I'll try to access that again. But eventually you find something because we're so complicated. There's so much going on under the
Yeah,
hood that we're not aware of, and it's
right,
trying to
right.
tell you in the same way dreams are trying to tell you. It's like this
Yeah,
is
yeah,
why.
yeah,
Like, hey, remember Mikey? Remember that. Remember him dancing. And there's a reason why you're supposed to remember that. And part of you knows, and part of you doesn't. And you're teaching the part that doesn't know what the rest of your
yeah,
body knows. Yeah.
yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead. Let's read another poem. I want to make sure we get to them all. These are great. Let's go to what growing up poor taught me from the new issue of Rattle.
Okay, yeah. This is called, first off, Tim, thanks so much for accepting this poem. I don't think I can say this as I know the poetry market pretty well. Nobody's doing what Rattle does, man. I mean, the community you've built, the doors you open, the opportunities you provide for people. I don't know how you sleep. There's so much going on. Because okay, and first off, props to Backlit winning the Florida Book Award. That's crazy. Congratulations to you and the author. Tim, forgive me, I forget the author's name. Do you know?
Liz Robbins. Yeah.
Liz Robbins. Liz, if you're watching this or if you ever watch it, congratulations. You'll love that. It was an amazing book, and already lent it to a student who's kind of doing something similar with her work. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I'm really happy to be included in the issue, and let's get to it. It's called "What Growing Up Poor Taught Me." Growing up poor taught me there's a lot you can do with 5 pounds of free government American cheese. Put it on Ritz crackers and saltines. Melt it on minute steaks, eggs, macaroni, baked potatoes. Melt it into cheese dip. Roll it into balls. Chop it into cubes. Slap it between pieces of Stroman smeared with free government butter and grill it on the stove. It taught me you can prop a window open in summer with the cardboard boxes the cheese and butter came in, that a kid can stack those boxes into a sweet ass fort for his toy soldiers. Growing up poor taught me at 12 how to take a faucet apart and figure out how to stop a leak. It taught me that people with the least money, like my mom, are often the best cooks, making meatloaf wrapped in bacon that will melt on your tongue, bringing buckets of potato salad to neighborhood barbecues by request. It taught me how to steal toys my mom couldn't afford, taught me how neatly Star Wars action figures could slide into the inside rip of a coat. It taught me that recycling starts at home when jelly jars become glasses, foil got washed and used again, kids' clothes flowed from house to house to house like hot gossip. It taught me long before Baldwin how expensive it is to be poor. Taught me what late fees do to mothers. Taught me that some people go to work every day to turn off other people's water and gas, and that there's a huge fee to get them turned back on. Taught me that buying in bulk is out of the realm of possibility for large chunks of our population is a phrase never uttered in many American homes. It taught me that once you've held food stamps, you're always holding them. Blank-faced Jefferson on the 5, blue-inked Lincoln on the soon-gone 20, even if, as an adult, you're clutching $1,000. It taught me to switch off lights when I leave a room, turn down the heat at bedtime and crawl under comforters. It taught me that, yes, some people bleed the system, that some people, like my cousin and his girlfriend, have more babies just to get themselves a raise from the government so they can buy more drugs, and that those people make everyone who needs help for a minute look crooked and lazy, which they're not. It taught me the politicians like to hold up pictures of zombie-faced huffers like my cousin outside social service agencies so they can gut vital programs, then scuba dive off Jeff Bezos's yacht. It taught me how to take a punch to the jaw, a kick to the balls, how to take a bat to the back and keep going. It taught me that Stallone's Rocky VI soliloquy, it ain't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, isn't just cheese. It's truth. It taught me, before I heard Lucille Clifton say it, to put my one hand inside my other hand when I had no one and tell myself, I got you. It taught me song lyrics can be poetry when Springsteen and The Clash and KRS-One and Kool Moe Dee gave me through their words and fierceness the blueprint for breaking out, waking something pissed off and scared within my core. It taught me to find a job where I could use my mind because I saw every man I grew up around work with their bodies until their bodies failed them and left them with no pension or savings, just anger and sadness pressing down on them through a thick cloud of cigarette smoke until they died. It taught me that much of life is luck and that I was lucky to make it out, lucky too to have been poor, to come from decent, broke, and broken people who are smarter than I am, funnier and better looking, who'd be all too happy to remind me that I'm nothing special. And I should thank my lucky frickin' stars every day for stepping in whatever pile of dog shit that led me to find a different path for myself, which, believe me, I do.
Yeah, it was a great inspiring poem. That was What Growing Up Poor Taught Me from the current issue of Rattle, also from Daniel Donaghy's forthcoming book. And I want to talk about that. That was in a special issue. The tribute section of Rattle was a tribute to rebel poets. And it was one of those things where I feel like, I wanted to do an issue like that for a long time because it feels like, in a really strange way, poetry is getting more and more safe as time goes on, Mm-hmm. And it used to be that, because I've been reading submissions to Rattle for over 20 years now, and it used to be that there was a lot more variety of opinions and perspectives than there are now. There's sort of a monoculture that's developed, and everybody feels a little bit timid to go outside of that monoculture. And so I was, to do this tribute to rebels issue, I was just thinking, like, what does it mean to rebel against that? And I didn't really know. Like, when we do these sections, it's like, well, we'll put out a thing and see what comes, and we'll publish the best representative-ish sample of good poems that come from this. Yeah. And it is. So I'm curious what you think about rebellion within poetry. Like what, you submitted to this category, what do you feel like you're rebelling against, I guess, to start?
I think I'm rebelling against the fake politeness that this the sterilized world that poetry can sometimes inhabit. And there's a poem. I wrote a poem about the Move bombing of 1985, May 13th, 1985. The Philadelphia Police Department bombed its own people. And I remember being in a workshop with people. Everyone in the room has books. And the conversation comes around. And it's about racism. It's about white people witnessing something going on the other side of Philadelphia and being really grossly insensitive to this horror. And being in that moment of we're going around and people who'd been through stuff, people who didn't have an automatic ticket to the ball, who really responded to the poem on a human level and could give me places about pushing, places to pull back. And then I remember going around and two people, we got into this discussion about, well, I really don't feel comfortable talking about poems like this. And I said, well, what do you mean? So, well, there's and this the issue of race. And as a white writer, as somebody who's white, that you can't talk about race. And we had Natasha Trethewey at my school, and she was talking about the terrain of race, and she was saying, well, it's this idea that only writers of color write about race. When you've put up your 17th book about you meditating, and 17 books, you've never mentioned a person of color, you are so clearly writing about race, and in a way that you don't realize, So I think I'm always rebelling against the same reason I ended up at the University of Rochester for the PhD, ultimately. Being where I'm from, and Kensington, like this is it. This is on Cambria Street, a couple blocks from where I grew up, and I'm always that kid. Like I'm still that kid, and I've got to, the Eagles come on, I get really excited about Eagles games, and if it goes well, I'm fine. But my kids have heard good and bad sounds come out of my mouth depending on how the game's going. But it's just getting a PhD from where I'm from, I see as a rebellious act. You say I'm inner city, I'm a welfare kid, I'm a Kenzo, I'm lower class, my dad left, I'm all the negative things. And I was like, all right. Once I got into college, I said, I can do this culture. All right, well, what's the highest one? All right, you guys. All right. So there was a thirst for knowledge, and I did the PhD, and I really needed to commit to something I love. I wrote about how African-American writers found an audience. I was always amazed by that. Like with all the discrimination going on, how did books by Black writers ever get published? And that's a whole fascinating story, toward autonomy through the Harlem Renaissance and its failures and coming out on the other end. But the idea of rebelling against kind of a sterility, a politeness, a calmness that happens in poetry, that I don't see any urgency. And, that's where I see it seems like there's always that person who needs to stand up to be the one. It's okay to be the loud one in the room. It's okay to talk about something that make people feel uncomfortable. Writing about class is an invisible thing. Like when we both walked around Rush Reed's library, we don't know who's there first gen, full scholarship, really tough times growing up. We don't know the kid who's, their parents, they're related to the Kodak family, so you're the inventors or whatever up there. So I think I'm rebelling against any notion that poetry is only for the privileged. There's always that chip on my shoulder that, yeah, it's there for a reason. It's still, that's just kind of how I see it. I always see my writing as kind of the underdog writing, and that's how I do it.
Yeah, the thing that I feel and I worry about, because I feel like there used to be more of the kind of poetry that you're writing. 20 years ago, there was more, and maybe it was like, Bukowski was still out there, and, and there was still that sort of like gritty, just tell it like it is, storytelling kind of thing, no matter what your perspective on life was. And that's what I loved in the early days of working on Rattle and getting all these submissions coming in, is just people telling their stories and from being completely different perspectives and different, classes, different races, different concepts. There were like far right conservatives sending poems, and there were, progressives sending poems, and there were, just people from all over the world, and just it was interesting to see different perspectives, like people who are into different things, and it feels like it's like narrowed down so much more, and I don't know. I mean, that's the thing, and it feels more and more like people are writing for like the pat on the back. That like, oh, you wrote a good, and maybe it's like the social media aspect of the way that's infected our lives, but everything is like getting sort of proverbial clicks on, publishing a magazine is like getting, 100 likes on your poem or something, and Facebook, it has that sense that it's like pleasing to a certain audience rather than just straightforwardly telling your stories in the same way it used to be. And then that's what it made me think about reading your submission the first time, is it's sort of like, to what I can think of as like old school 90s poetry, which you just don't see as often anymore.
Yeah. Well, while you're saying that, I think that I was thinking of Langston Hughes's essay, "A Negro Artist in the Racial Mountain," where he's asking there, where he's coming at a time, he's writing about all of Black culture. And Du Bois is telling him, stop writing about elevator operators. Stop talking about, one of my favorite poems in the world is his Morning After. Just stop talking about guys waking up, hungover and, drunk last night. I didn't hardly know my mind. I drunk bad liquor that nearly made me blind, It's a funny poem. You should all look up because it's got a great punchline of an ending. But, there are people at that time telling him, don't write like that. Write another Negro Speaks of Rivers. We need the representational, metaphorical, larger work that's universal. And he said in that essay something that I say to my students all the time. When writing this kind of thing is, you got to go for it. You got to be brave. You've got to have faith that your story is worth telling, even if it's just for you. And what he says in that essay is, no great artist is afraid of being themselves. And he said, if white people like my writing, that pleases me. If they don't like it, I don't care. If Black people like my writing, that pleases me. And if they don't like it, I don't care. I have to be that I'm doing what's true to me. And yeah, writing because it can get into like, we're a little older, so you get started and, you share poems with your friends and you send them out to magazines, they get in or they don't get in. But we didn't have it like, you write a poem, Tim, and you post on Instagram and it gets 100 likes. And then you write another one that's really, man, this one hurt. That only gets 10 likes. So Instagram's telling you not to write like that anymore, right? And that can be really confusing, I think, for young writers who are looking for that validation. And I would just advise if you can stay away from that, but it is really ubiquitous in that way, so.
Yeah, I think it's a huge problem. But let's do more poems. We're behind on our poem rate. Let's go to Birthday Poem for My Mother from Somerset.
Yeah, okay. All right. So I write a lot about my family, and this is a poem called Birthday Poem for My Mother. And the reason that, like I said, that first poem I wrote in Harry Hume's workshop was about my dad and things that happened in the house. And then that led me to write more about him. And I found myself writing these basically letters to him and saying things to him in writing that I couldn't say out loud. So I'd say for anybody watching this, I hope poetry has been a friend for you in the way it has been for me, is that it's allowed me to have conversations with my dad that I could never have actually had, but that I needed to work through and I needed to find the words toward. I say that when I'm writing a poem, I'm trying to find the vocabulary that is spoken, the language that is spoken in the world I want to live in. It's a world beyond fear, beyond doubt, beyond pain, beyond silence, toward freedom and liberation, and I'm the biggest mommy's boy who's ever walked the planet, and I wear that badge proudly. And this is a poem to my mom, and she had passed. But the beautiful thing about writing is when people leave our lives and they live in our hearts, we can conjure them back. And when we read them, they come back to us, So this is called Birthday Poem for My Mother. If she were alive to read this, my poem would be different. with her dog in it, maybe, or grandchildren, or her tomatoes staked in the 4 square foot plot behind the row home she raised us in, with rot holes in the floor big enough to swallow shoes into the cave of that dirt cellar, which was always wet, which seeped like acid into old photos and washed them clean. And even if we were happy, she would have cried, not that she would have understood it or cared to or wanted it as much as flowers she could set like a trophy on the entertainment center, but because she cried, it seemed so often. Birthdays, weddings, old movies and songs, TV shows, long lost names, or an ordinary Tuesday with no wind, blue skies, a pair of cardinals. And suddenly her face closed on itself with how cleanly she'd cut herself off from her family when they said my father was no good, and with how my father left her to fend for herself and for us, and her being unable to, going on welfare, holding my hand the first of each month outside the St. Francis Mission, where we waited for Father Pat to bless the free butter and cheese. She would have shown the poem to my sister at dinner tonight, to her neighbors tomorrow, and then stuck it on the refrigerator to disappear behind coupons. She would have said it was beautiful, like the canal I'm sitting by as I write this, no matter how ugly it was. A woman rode by on a bike earlier with my mom's hair, freshly permed and cut short, hair sprayed in place. She waved at me and shook her head. And since then, I've been 10 again. It's been midsummer, the sun low over the center city skyline. I've just come in from the hydrant, and my mother is holding open a towel. How close we get to the dead sometimes. Her knees crack as she squats. She waves me close. She smells like spaghetti sauce. Her fingers are the slipperiness hot water washes from pasta as she cloaks me until I'm warm.
Yeah, so it's Birthday Poem for My Mother by Daniel Donaghy from Somerset. So I should say at this point, if anybody has any questions for Daniel, please leave them in the chat window, especially on YouTube. That's the one I watch the most, and helps, like Thomas Mixon did, put question all in bold so I can see it. Also, if you haven't yet, please click the like button. There's always far more people watching live than have clicked like so far, and your clicking like helps poetry spread around the world. So let me ask this question from Thomas Mixon. He says, Daniel mentioned urgent stories. How does he decide what's urgent? Specifically with the What's Growing Up poem, he mentioned a cousin. I'm curious why I mentioned that person specifically.
Yeah, that's my cousin Bobby, who just passed away a couple years ago. He disappeared, nobody found him. And I got an email from a woman, from a nun who was working at a shelter in our old neighborhood that he had gotten clean, and he wanted his family to know he was clean and he had passed away. But what qualifies as urgent? That's a great question. And I stole from Lucille Clifton in that poem. I steal from Lucille Clifton in this response, is that I don't pick what I'm going to write about. I pick what needs to come out, comes out. And sometimes I'm writing and I don't even realize that I was going in that direction, or I was going to say that thing. But I've learned very much to make appointments with myself and to sit down, always starting with notepads and brainstorming. And I start writing, and when that tangent comes, and I found myself going off on some completely other direction, that's my subconscious wants to tell me, like you said earlier, some part of me wants to tell me what it needs to say. And that's where the urgency comes from. I mean, what do you need to say? And sometimes you don't need to say it. Like, you don't know you need to say it. And I don't want to go off on too many tangents, but I gave a writing prompt. I went to one school, and kids, boy, it was really intense. It was great. And they were sharing, and we're all crying. And it was really something. And later, I had to go right to another high school. I was doing these into the same day. I said, well, that was a big morning. I'll just give let's write a recipe poem. Let's think about our family and we're kind of like it was like ninth and 10th graders too. So let's go a little lower. And this person wrote a recipe about her father's betrayal. And she went for it. Whoa. And it was like this, whatever assignment I gave her, she was going to write about that. And it killed. And like kids didn't even know that in the room. So I think the urgent subjects are the ones that demand that you write about them and not just say them, but that you write through them to find some new language that you can use to live with and be fortified with going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Great answer to that. Let's pick up the poem pace and do our block's first black couple next.
Okay, yeah, this is a little heavier. This was in the third book Somerset, and you're looking at like what urgent issues have you not written about, right? And I hadn't written about the ubiquitous racism that I grew up in my house. So in this book, there's a poem about the move bombing. There's a poem about my father openly committing a really egregious racist act. And then there's this poem, and I was new to the city. We had lived in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, and Levittown, Pennsylvania, lost those houses, and we were in an apartment that my dad's brother owned. And luckily, he owned this building with 3 floors, and nobody was there, so we had a place to go. And I'm on Albert Street again. It's come up a couple times today. And a friend of mine's dad says, "You see that empty lot over there? Yeah, you know who tried to move in there? Black people tried to move in there." And of course, he didn't say black people, And it was filed away, and I'm writing about, okay, what else? Just kind of thinking about my childhood, what else I could write about. And I'm going, dude, are you kidding me? So I was trying to find the way to write this. And this is called Our Block's First Black Couple. And this was really written in response to of Major Jackson. He's an essential poet. He gets bonus points from being from Philadelphia. It's not required, but it helps. But I love Major Jackson, and he years ago, it was 2007, I believe, had his essay "A Mystifying Silence," big and black, and really talking, highlighting the lack of the few white poets who are going to write about race. And in there, some of it is there's a lot of reasons to it. It's a long essay people should check out, but part of this is the challenge of, let's step into this. I don't know how this is going to come out, but I need to bear witness to those experiences. Let me see. This is called Our Block's First Black Couple. Before our family fell into Philly, when we lost the Levittown house, before I snapped my ankle, when I failed to fly from an abandoned rooftop onto used mattresses, before I watched a suicide's blood drip from an L train's wheel onto my screaming sister's head, fathers of my future friends nodded over slotted ashtrays in track-shadowed Tinney's bar. Exactly how and when, and then one July night, no one in the neighborhood heard or saw anything. Not the basement's window smash, not the flock of fat men running down Albert Street to a car, to the bar, to the beers they'd been sipping all evening, officer, while our block's first black couple slept through flames.
Yeah, so that was Our Block's First Black Couple from Somerset. You've written 5 books. You have a 6th one, the manuscript ready. Row Home and Flickering Light, which we've been reading some poems from too, and they do address similar topics. It's sort of like the growing up, the working class life, the characters that how have you evolved, would you say, through the course of the books? Like, how do you keep it fresh for yourself? I know there's so many stories, so there's so many stories to tell, but the poetry has to keep evolving. So what would you say you've done to push the poems forward like that?
Yeah, well, one, I think really embracing, that now what growing up poor taught me ends up being about 5 pages long, right? Of really seeing where energy and anaphora can take me in musicality. and also just trying to be more rigorous and daring and honest, really revealing my essential self in writing about the hardest of issues. Um, and also in Somerset, there's a lot more formal poems. That's a challenge for me that I had not really engaged in before. And that's something when I've been away from poetry for a while and come back to it, form presents a whole new set of challenges for you to maintain your voice and urgency in music and try to get to that discovered subject. But now you're kind of trapped in a box, and it needs to look like the inevitable box. Um, and and just of trying also to expand outside of the Philly poems, if this whole manuscript going, it's called Omissions, and it rises out of, going to be careful of how I say this, but looking the way I do as a middle class white guy, um, over my years of experience, I have found that there seems, I don't know, Tim, I don't want to put you on the spot if you've ever been in this really uncomfortable moment, but you're there and people will feel that because I'm this white dude, that obviously I'm racist too, and will say to me the most horrible things. And you're there, and something I heard growing up, and I didn't have an answer to, was it's been 150 years now, 160 years, of course, since Emancipation Proclamation, and what have Black people ever done in this country, right? And I knew that was a ridiculous position, but I didn't have an answer to that. So one of the things with this book of omissions, it's just my own personal journey of doing research on remarkable communities of color, individuals of color who've been fantastically successful and inspirational, who are lost to history, who I never learned about in school. So as I continue to think about, and not just being nostalgic, writing about Philly back in the day, but writing also of keeping one foot in the pool and making sure that I'm aware of what's going on now. And as gentrification rises from Spring Garden Street through Fishtown up into the Kensington area, um, of the new sets of questions that arise out of that. But again, from a position of personal conflict, not from the position of rhetoric, as Yeats says, right? A poem is a conflict with the self, where rhetoric would be the best tool for conflict with another. So the idea is to continue to ask yourself harder questions, to bear witness also. The theme of this new book that I didn't know was happening was it really is becoming fluent in the language of thanks, becoming fluent in a language beyond grief, beyond suspicion and pain and racism and all of those things. So it's just trying to be true to who I am at a particular moment, knowing, I mean, Philly's always in the background, but what else is there? How is it new? How is it contemporary? And how does that work within the lens of my family now? And also, this other project, which I'm really excited about, that I hope will see the light of day someday.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a perfect segue. Let's read a poem from Omissions, the part one of the Tulsa triptych.
Okay, yeah, this is if anyone is aware of the Tulsa Race Massacre of May 31st, it was prom night, May 31st to June 1st, 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There was an area in North Tulsa called Greenwood, and it was where African Americans were really the only place they were allowed to live. And this is after the statehood had just come in 1907. So there were land claims, and an Arkansas freedman named O.W. Gurley came up to Tulsa and was able to secure 40 acres. And what he did with his 40 acres of land, but only again in North Tulsa, was that he was an entrepreneur. He'd started this in other areas in rural Oklahoma, and said, what we can do here is we could build a town, a self-sufficient community in the middle of Jim Crow, and actually use Jim Crow as the impetus toward our own wealth. So all these people, then they find oil, right? Oh my gosh. So all these people now, you need field hands, you need day workers, you need domestics. So O.W. Gurley had his 40 acres of land and would let us, if we were black, would let us buy land from him only on the condition that you would be paying in as you there, and you're going to get all the money you can get, and you deserve that, but you're also going to be chipping in for our post office, our schools, our hospitals, our cab services, our theaters. So this thing happens, Tim, and it's amazing what happens. We know about the Tulsa Race Massacre. I hope people do it, and if you don't, it's a dark but necessary part of history for
Yeah,
people
we
to
got a great
understand.
poem by Clemence Hurd about that. If anyone wants to
Yeah,
look it
yeah,
up in
yeah.
Rattle, yeah, it's called 21. But yeah,
It was when was that?
I don't know, a few years ago, by Clemence
Okay.
Hurd, who's been a guest on the Rattlecast, just directing people that way. There's a lot of details about the massacre there. Yeah,
Yeah, so check that out. But anyway, in writing about this, I didn't want to just highlight what happened. I wanted to highlight what people were so afraid of. And this is just celebrates the absolute excellence that was in Tulsa before the spurious conditions that led to the massacre. So this is the first section of that poem. It's called Tulsa Triptych. And this section is called Dreamland. O.W. Gurley bought 40 Tulsa acres, named them Greenwood, said they were only to be sold to colored in Greenwood, where he dreamed a bigger Bowley, Langston, Taft, Redbird, thriving all black Oklahoma towns before Greenwood, before statehood brought its Jim Crow laws that made the Klan king everywhere but Greenwood, where Gurley opened a rooming house that sheltered fleeing black migrants. Greenwood, from its start, a promised land. Greenwood, where Gurley met young lawyer J.B. Stratford, and the two built empires. Greenwood, only place black Tulsans could shop, where a dollar traded hands for years and built communal wealth. Greenwood, a self-sufficient world, 10,000 people. 40 blocks of black businesses and homes, 20 churches, its own hospital, post office, bank, schools. Greenwood, home to the Stratford, nation's best black hotel, velvet wingback chairs, oak tables and doors, chandeliers, its own pool hall, saloon, dining room, and of course, Greenwood had the Dreamland, Tulsa's Apollo, black vaudeville, theater troupes, silent films with live piano, 750 seats, and black people free to walk in the front door and sit in any of them. Greenwood, where a man got a suit, shine, shave, and fade on the same block he shot whiskey and pool. Greenwood, where Remingtons clacked through evening typing classes and maids packed salons to primp for their Thursday nights off. Greenwood, fork clink, chatter hum, steam rising off barbecue and chili in any number of cafes. Sunnyside, Cozy Corner, Busy Bee, Little and Bell, Lone Star, Square Deal. Greenwood, dancers and doctors, hustlers and haberdashers, Smithermen, stressing vigilance in each edition of the Star. Greenwood, more than the Negro Wall Street Washington deemed it. Greenwood, Black Main Street, a blueprint for making a way out of no way, a dreamland, real as rain raising the Arkansas River over its banks, real as Klansmen's footprints stuck into the mud there, real as oil spewed from a blown out well that looks like smoke over the Dreamland Theater on June 1st, 1921, when the wind catches it, the only cloud in a clear sky, real as the Greenwood Avenue you could walk this afternoon, towing snow off tiny markers where shops and offices once stood, whispering prayers, listening for any sound of all that was Greenwood, and hearing only the steady whoosh of 244 built like the ballpark and the health center to erase the crime scene, the open wound, the sacred ground, the victory of Greenwood.
yeah. Another powerful poem that was from a forthcoming manuscript by Daniel Donaghy that was from the Tulsa Triptych. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Daniel. and that book is called Omissions. That's from the manuscript. Let's see, we're running up on time. Let me get here a quick question over from Facebook, which I usually don't take them from Facebook, but I happen to see this, and it's a quick one. What is we just mentioned, branching out from Philly, but Bernard Haskey says, what is your most Philly book? My fiance is from Tacony and would like to get it for her. She went to Temple, left Philly for some decades for York. Anyway, what's your most Philly book?
Most Philly book? Well, this is kind of, well, they're all Philly. I mean, I can't get far away from it, but I'm a little biased. Probably Somerset. I mean, it's the newer one. It's got. I'm proud of all of them, but I think Somerset might be might be a good starter.
Yeah.
But any of them, you won't be disappointed by the lack of Philly poems in any of them. But this one I think is Start with the Trouble might have fewer pound for pound Philly poems. So I'd go with one of these, which are probably like for 5 cents on Amazon. Not that we want to support Amazon and Jeff Bezos' yachts. We do not want to do that.
There you go. Well, there was Streetfighting and Somerset that Danny was
I would
holding
start
up.
there. Yeah.
All right, I don't know. We can do this one quickly, but Elizabeth Brown wants to know, does the contrast of the grittiness and poverty make the beauty inherent in life so much more sayable? If one survives, that is. Yeah, there's something about the contrast that really does make you notice and appreciate in a way that maybe you wouldn't otherwise.
Right? I mean, we appreciate the sunlight because it's been dark all night. When you've been, you treasure your honest friends because you've been lied to. That's the last poem. If I don't know how we go on time, you want to cut to maybe just the last poem? I know there's two on the two left.
Let's just wrap up with one last poem. That'd be a perfect segue to it too. Yeah,
I think this kind of segues to it. It's kind of bearing witness to now. So should I just get right to it?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
this is sort of my answer to that question. It's called The Language After Loss. Nights when it's warm and my wife and our girls are relaxing after dinner, I come out to the garden and deadhead spent blooms toss twigs and leaves over the rock wall and into the woods. I turn on the hose, water the roots of foxglove and yarrow, blue salvia, Shasta daisies. Then, the mulch shiny, I sit on the bench beside the white arbor and crack open a beer I don't drink at first. It's cold and sweating in my hands. I think each time of my parents who never got near a life like this. Their Pall Mall hazed nights, a glass table of bills and sickness and worry, they leaned over while KYW News Radio gave weather on the eights and sports at quarter of and quarter after. No light reaching them from the small window that overlooked the alley, while all they'd never have blistered in their lungs until I breathed it in too. Then lay awake so many nights, wondering where I fit in that bitter city. Every man I knew growing up showered after work and wore a memoir of scars on his face and arms. None ever learned a language beyond loss and clench-jawed anger that scared their wives and kids and made them barstool tough for a few years, but in the end, like my father, left them sad, withered, mute, out of joy's reach, far from blessings, like the bird songs, calling across boughs above me. After a childhood of pigeons, I'll always marvel at a goldfinch's transition from brown to bright yellow each spring. Always hear music and bird names while I watch them work our feeders, downy woodpeckers, tufted titmice, white-throated sparrows, bluebirds, blue jays, chickadees, wrens, lazy mourning doves pecking the ground near chipmunks and a bare-tailed squirrel. The eastern cottontail whose litter left our vegetable patch only this morning. Just as I hear music in my wife's name and our daughters, as I practice breathing out the past, breathing in all I can of this second language, this second life.
Yeah, beautiful poem. Great poem to end on, Daniel. Thanks so much for being a guest. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. So much fun, so informative, and love your poems too. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Tim, and for all you do for poetry. Endless thanks. Take
Definitely
care.
my pleasure. Yeah, thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, that was Daniel Donaghy. You can find all Daniel's books at danieldonaghy.com. That's Daniel, Daniel, Donaghy, Donaghy, danieldonaghy.com. And now we're going to move on to our invited prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to pick a decision that shaped the trajectory of your life and imagine if you'd calculated a different choice. Include at least 1 cent. So it's a complicated prompt. We're going to be learning a little bit more about each other by sharing these poems. Looking forward to that. So we'll be right back. And I should say, if you submitted yours, you had to submit yours by midnight on Sunday night. And if you received an invite link before the show, please join the Zoom now. You have the Zoom link. Every week, Katie picks the prompts, then picks, about 8 to 10 or so poets every week to join us and share the best poem, trying to keep variety of topics and a lot of stuff in mind as well. So if you were sent a Zoom link, join us now, and we'll be right back with a whole lot more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience as we shuffle around a little bit. I'm here with our creative editor, our prompt poems editor, and my wife, Katie Dozier. How you doing, Katie?
I'm doing great. Enjoy the discussion. I'm excited to hear some great poems on the invited prompt lines tonight.
Yeah, me too. So the prompt this week was pick a decision that shaped the trajectory of your life and imagine if you'd calculated a different choice, also include a cent. So that's why we'll know that you wrote the poem a long time ago if you didn't include a cent. Right? Is that how that works?
We're always looking for something to a way to get something in other than sight in poems.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't seen your poem. It was hot off the press right before the show.
Yeah,
so
that is
always
very
exciting.
Much true.
Although usually it's me doing that.
It'd be more fun if we polled people. We're like, how long do you think I took on this poem? Because I don't like this thing in poetry that's like, oh, I spent 5 minutes. Well, it's worthless. Yeah. I have worked for 10 years on this poem. I feel like it's something that everybody says. I will never say that to you. I promise. I promise. All right. So this is a haibun, although not part of the haibun crown we're writing because I didn't include your haiku words. So
yet another haibun.
No days off haibun. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I can feel my mom's inhale after the first line of this, like what's coming after the first line. Poor mom. Don't worry. Okay. Moving. My parents divorced that year. On the bus in 8th grade, I just learned what dry humping was, and it was not a string of camels sewing across the Sahara. I found it easy enough to work out the mirage of popularity, just another sandy checklist. Sit in the center of the cafeteria so the palm trees grow beside you. Push away the smell of French fries. Learn to snub the brownies. Impersonate the sun with yellow eyeliner. Wear jeans big enough to make waves ripple all around you. And my new friends surfed in the back of the bus, hurling paper airplanes at any kid that dared to turn around. Missing the seatbelt childhood.
Very cool Dozier haiku in there. And, or Dozier coup.
Thank you. Thank you. I was very offended.
Yeah. So really, I love the story there, and then great use of the haiku.
Thank
I love
you.
the haiku.
If the poem had continued on, it would have been that my dad gave me a lecture. This is a bit more. I wouldn't actually hang out with people who were jerks, but so I took some liberties on this one, but resulted in a lecture with my dad. I still remember, like, you could take the high road. You can take the low road. And I realized it was a very big moment in my life in 8th grade where I could pick and I did. I changed out my friends. Yep.
That's a great piece of advice and something that's so important that we tend not to do. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, well, definitely. A really cool poem. It was moving.
Also, school buses should have seatbelts.
They probably should.
They probably do now.
No, I think the statistics, it's the dangers are so low that it's
but the danger is the kids standing up being jerks.
That's true. They should just be tied down.
No, I don't know if you're going to get a lot of support on that one. Okay. So what did you come up with?
Okay. So mine, I sort of went sort of the general concept I was thinking about. And this is part of our Haibin Crown. And so I had to incorporate some of your words.
Of course, I know this
haiku.
poem. I'm sorry. I said that like I didn't know what poem.
No,
But this
okay.
is great.
Yeah. So it's nice. We're doing if people don't know, we're doing every month for the month of April.
Every year
for the month of April. We've done a Haibin Crown where we go back and forth, and you have to use the words from the other person's haiku in your poem the next day. So we alternate back and forth.
Or the last haiku, if it's a multi-haiku poem, I should say, because it's about to become relevant.
Yeah, because the first haiku this year, for the first time, Katie had 2 haiku in it in the Haibin.
The first Haibin. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm saying all the wrong words all the time. It's okay.
I got you. It's okay.
But anyway, thanks for the editing there on the fly. But yeah, so Katie established that it would be the last haiku that we use the words from, so I had to at some point do a multi-haiku.
And you went for it here.
And I went for it. I also did the with those braided in. I always wanted to read into the haiku.
Yeah.
So these are all read into the haiku. Anyway, and this is the general concept of those sort of forks in life. It's called spoilers. I wonder, does cinematography shape our memories, or do the shapes of memories shape our cinema? Either way, there's a camera zooming in on every pivot point, a slow pan to the cursor at the center of the screen, clicking send, the stepped leader, flash. The lab report on an empty bench you faked to finish a poem. The cross-country drive into a new life becomes a time-lapse montage of toll booths and bridges, a string of tail lights up the mountain pass. Nothing to hug but the fog line. Why can't you taste the churro in Casper, Wyoming? Why can't you smell the benzene sweetness of the gas you spilled on your hands? You can still hear the grinding of gravel as you pace the yard, pondering divorce, the San Andreas asleep. You can see yourself from a satellite. You can see the cell phone cradled near the car that you never saw, the seesaw sewing. So is that why movies have no scent? Is it salt from popcorn drying on the tongue? Whose is the finger pressing play, the drama upstaged? And if it is like a movie, then where is the warehouse that stores the reels that never aired? Where is the back lot of what studio? Who sources the B-roll? Who hides the alternate endings, all the periods missing? Who pays the guards to man the vaults and watch for us the cuts we wouldn't have wished we hadn't watched? There we go.
Well, I really love that poem. And I have to say, my favorite haiku is the alternate endings one, because it's got like this wonderful meta haiku-ness to it, because there are so many ways to interpret that. And then the alternate endings is like also kind of breaking the fourth wall with like directly addressing the alternate endings. So I think that's one of my favorite haiku you've ever written too.
Oh, well, thanks so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. But it was fun. It's fun. I've loved doing this. It's hard to write other stuff while we're in the middle of doing our Haibin Crown. But but it is really fun.
Well, at least it's Haibin we're stuck in and not like ballads. No, nothing against ballads. Sorry. I'm sure they're great. I've just written like one. So.
Okay. Well, let's go next to our community host, none other than Dick Westheimer. Hey, Dick, how you doing?
Good. So far be it from me to give you editorial advice, Tim, but that first little prose piece in Haibin, and haiku, I thought that was it, and it was wonderful. It did more work than my whole poem in just those 8 short lines.
So cut the whole thing.
Well,
much.
I don't know if you should cut the whole thing, but maybe just that first one could. I don't know. I loved it, and I thought, oh, I mean, what happened for me? I transgressed this week. I wrote a poem more than one page for the prompt lines, which I know is part of the deal with these new ones.
It is part of the deal. And also part of the deal with you reading first is that you promo the community readings, one of which is coming right up next Sunday, correct?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the promotional word, which I was going to follow up with. Dion O'Reilly, who will be my co-host, and I just love. I've posted on the Rattlecast prompts page a link to one of her interviews. She's a fabulous interviewer on her radio show. Yes. And I encourage folks who are going to join us or not just to listen to her interview a poet and get a sense of who she is as a reader of poems.
And that's on the Hive, right?
That's on the Hive Poetry Collective. There's a link on the prompt lines page. And she's just a great interviewer, and I think she'll be a terrific co-host.
Well, definitely, and that'll
so
be
y'all
on
come.
7.
I think you're in for a treat.
I'm sure you all will be, 7 p.m. Eastern. And I will also send out a reminder to everyone who has submitted a prompt poem already this month so that you have easy access to that link too. So thank you so much for hosting that. And we're excited to hear your, how'd you refer to it? Transgression?
Transgressive, as I went over a page on a prompt lines poem. That could have been summed up in, Tim's first Haibin. Here we go. Family tree in the age of uncertainty. All stories start in the middle. This particular tale teetering on the edge of 2 universes. One, me as a physics major. The other, my becoming a school teacher in a building so old it was built when there was only one known galaxy. My basement classroom was next to an old fallout shelter where I met a woman in a blue gingham dress who smelled of patchouli, whose ovaries were a siren to my sperm, the 2 meeting later that night to make a child who was so tiny he had to live in a heated box tended to by nurses in white paper caps and MDs with stethoscopes draped over their necks, and the boy grew to be a teen who rescued a pregnant woman from a car rolled over in a ditch, whose baby grew up to work in a sub-Saharan clinic where she prevented a man from contracting AIDS, a man who pulled a child from a well where she'd been trapped for 14 days, a child who sung the old songs to elders of her village. In the other universe, I became a physicist who stayed up late one night getting stoned with a math savant who raved about 10 dimensions of space and time, none of them real, where all the stars and atoms and bosons and quarks exist everywhere all at once, and time wraps around us like yarn on a bobbin. I died by thinking too hard about it, imagining a yellow wood woven from an infinite number of paths making up its warp and weft, wishing I understood the math of it all and lamenting what could have been had I become an elementary school teacher who sat on the floor reading to 4th graders gathered round, their chins cupped in their small hands as I read aloud from our favorite book, yours and mine, A Wrinkle in Time.
Wow.
Yeah, well, that was a great poem, Dick. And speaking of the energy that Daniel was talking about, that's got a lot of great energy in that one.
Yeah, I love that, the bobbin metaphor for time wrapping around. That's really nice. Yeah, and it's also really nice to picture you teaching. Like, it's just, I feel like I have a little window into that, big part of your life and everything now that I wasn't quite able to picture before. It's the basement detail that you're bringing light to the kids in the basement.
basement of this decrepit old school next to the piles of surplus food that had been moldering there. It wasn't so long, it was during the middle of the Cold War. So we still had those fallout shelter signs on our doors. And, my room was a place where I guess the neighborhood would gather and duck and cover and wait out the war. Who knows?
Yeah. Wow. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Dick, and thanks for all your work as our community host.
Yeah, and I hope to see as many, many, many people reading their wonderful poems. I so look forward to this event. I feel like kid in a candy store when I get to hear all the great poems.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Dick, as always, for everything you do. We always appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, it was Dick Westheimer, our community host. And if you're new to the show, don't know what we're talking about, that is once a month, the last Sunday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern, Dick hosts a community reading where anybody is invited to come onto a Zoom. It's private. It's not broadcast, so people can feel free if you're like a little nervous about sharing poems in public. Great sort of icebreaker for yourself, getting used to sharing poems that way.
Mm-hmm. Share your prompt poem from any prompt this month.
Yep,
So.
Any of the 4 or 5 prompts in any month.
Yeah, we got a lot
do
this month.
We do, yeah. It depends where the Sundays fall or Mondays fall. But yeah, so do. And then go to reddit.com/page/prompts. It's up there in the heading. On the prompt lines, you can find a link to the Zoom there. So join on Sunday.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go to another poet. Let's go next to a first-time caller. Clara Silverstein is here.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here and happy for all that you do for poetry with Rattle.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, we're so glad to have you. Where are you calling from?
I am in the Boston area.
Ah,
Wonderful.
great. We were just there.
We were there not too long ago, and we want to go back. Definitely. We were really impressed with all the art, and the literary scene is amazing there. So really so much to say about Boston.
Yeah, we had a great time.
Boston, a great place for writers to be.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so this one, it's the first prompt poem I've ever sent in. So I'm really beginner's luck, right? To my almost third child. What if you grew from the heat and a few unprotected moments? A ball of cells burgeoning into your biscuit and talc scent. Your exquisite face cuddled against my chest. Your own name lined up with your brother and sister. The calm one, assembling your collection of beetles and shells and jars of seawater. The one who would remind me most of the father I lost, his unfinished orbit. Behind my closed lids, your after image glows, bright as a filament.
Yeah,
Thank you.
What a touching turn in that poem too.
Definitely.
Yeah, moving to that.
And I thought your description of the scent with the biscuit and talc, like, wow, that was really impressive. It's, if you asked me what, I remember my baby's, smelling like too. It's such a hard question to answer in a fresh way, but biscuit and talc, I think that's puts it very well. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Clara Silverstein with To My Almost Third Child. Next, let's go to Jeff Stumpo.
Hey, y'all. How you doing?
Hey, great. And Jeff's going to be the guest coming up on May 3rd, a special Sunday show.
Yeah.
We're excited about that, Jeff. And
that is going to be really fun.
Yeah, really
I am
excited for your
very
new
excited
book.
about that. It's been a busy month here.
Yeah, I bet.
Writing.
Yeah.
I am temporarily at home. I've been doing a residency at the Vermont Studio Center since the beginning of April, and my book released this past weekend. So I'm back in New Hampshire for that briefly, but going back to the residency tomorrow.
Oh,
Well, great. And in the meantime, writing prompt poems somehow.
Yeah, I'm back on using the prompts to fuel this choose your own cataclysm,
Yay!
choose your own adventure into the world thing that I don't exactly know where it's going, but that's okay. So obviously this hasn't actually happened to me yet, and hopefully never. Downwind. The dead don't moan. It turns out we know them by the smell. Opened earth and opened guts and the closing off of options. We've learned loss has a particular scent, like digging in a garden whose season has passed. Look at us, patrolling this patch where in some unknown months we must try to coax life from the loam. Look at us, keeping our distance from each other, the better to keep out the stench from not having bathed since this stopped being our world. Look at the sky and how it thinks about opening up, too. A cold wind whipping our ragged clothes. If you pray for rain, turn to page X. If you believe weather can be a bad omen, turn to page Y.
I love that choose your own adventure form there.
Yeah.
It works perfectly as a kind of cut. Yeah.
I think this might be obvious to everyone else too, but this made me realize I love choose your own adventures because it does to make you feel like you're at that point in your own life that's like, you can't turn back, although obviously everyone does to see what have happened in the other option, but it has like the same energy. So I thought it was a really creative way to approach this.
Yeah.
So I'm still having fun with the prompts and trying to do those. So
Great.
eventually it'll come together.
Well, thanks so much, Jeff. And
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
See you for sure next month, not before. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see you May 3rd, which everybody should note is a Sunday because our daughter Josephina has a choir concert Monday night. So we're going to move the show a little bit. But Jeff graciously moved back.
Because he likes Sunday Fun Day too.
He does. Yeah, we all do. So it's going to be a fun Sunday episode with Jeff there. All right. And that was his Jeff Stumpo with Downwind. All right. Let's go next to another first-time caller. Martha Paterson is here. Hey, Martha. How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Yeah,
I'm good.
So where are you calling from?
Boston, Massachusetts.
Another
Oh,
Boston.
wow. Well represented tonight. This is exciting.
I think you're biased. You're just picking Boston poets.
We just like Boston too much. Yeah.
Well, very cool. So what do you have to share for us?
Well, in response to your prompt, I wrote about a time quite a few years ago when I was homeless for a while. It's called A Hawk. A hawk rose like my ragged self above the pond I often frequented, and I wondered if I'd dislike you less, Dad, if you'd never tossed me out. I was bereft and needy, wanting the comfort of a cozy kitchen and a cup of tea, but I had nowhere then to go and was stranded like an endangered bird. I walked alone and desperate. My only offspring's wish was to generate a nest. My clipped wings struggling on unwelcoming and sandy shores. But the scent that day of that muddy pond, the algae and the frogs was too much for me. So I checked into a citified hotel and found peace in my expensive bed. When you died, Dad, I wondered if you had regrets for your indifference, because I regret my isolation from you. Like lightning, did I strike fiery sparks between us?
Yeah, another powerful poem and then another turn, but right away that time.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, that Dad, if you'd never tossed me out, coming out of nowhere in line 4 and then spreading throughout the poem. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah,
that.
and a powerful metaphor with lightning at the end too. So thanks so much. It was great to get to see you.
And I want to thank Daniel for his interview with you. That was really terrific.
Yeah, well, thanks so
great.
much. We really
Yeah.
enjoyed it, and thanks so much for being here,
Thank
Martha. Yeah. Yeah, that was Martha Paterson with A Hawk. And next, let's go to Jared Campbell.
Hello.
Hey, Jared.
Hey, Jared. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Let's see. So what do you have for us?
Work-life balance. If I hadn't gone to law school, then I wouldn't do Form 4s, and I wouldn't do board minutes, one of life's obnoxious chores. I wouldn't check the database of SEC proceedings, and I wouldn't stay up late before the comp committee meetings. If I hadn't gone to law school, then I wouldn't have the debt that made me look for law firm jobs. I never would have met the shades who balance work with what a law firm calls a life, or moved up to Manhattan, which is where I met my wife. The memory of her backlit silhouette in early May is what wisteria smells like. Thank God it didn't go this way. But if I hadn't gone to law school, far as I can tell, wisteria would be just another flower and just another smell.
Oh, that is such a sweet poem.
Isn't that sweet?
That really is.
And I mean, wow, I would love to be told I was like with the wisteria. I mean, that is, that is a clincher.
She's not like wisteria. She's what makes wisteria meaningful.
Yes, I'm sorry. I stand corrected. It's true. Yeah, I also just thought this was interesting because so often I feel like I hear people say, I should have gone to law school. So this is from the other side, I think, too.
Yeah. Well, very, very beautifully sweet poem.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for
really
sharing
sweet.
that, Jared. Yeah.
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jared Campbell with Work-Life Balance.
Wisteria is the perfect choice for flower, too.
Aw.
It is very sweet.
Next, let's go to Veronica Tucker.
All right. Hello.
Hi,
Hey,
Veronica.
Veronica.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Nice to see you guys too. I am coming at you guys from New Hampshire, so we have more East Coast
Wow,
representation.
we're really
Wow,
swinging
yeah.
up there this
I
week.
know.
Thank you. Yeah.
So this is counterfactual with milk. The life I did not choose began in a quiet exam room, paper crinkling beneath me, gel cooling on my skin, that faint antiseptic sweetness. The screen turned toward me, grain resolving into motion. There was a moment before it entered language. In that version, I take longer than necessary at the sink, dry my hands twice, leave with nothing added to me. Outside, coffee stays hot, even as I forget it. No one waiting inside my name. Here, the body keeps time without me. Milk comes in whether I am ready or not. Sharp, animal let down at a cry, or nothing. It gathers, tightens, spills, a map I did not draw. There are nights I wake already answering, but sometimes there is that other quiet. She is already in motion, keys in her hand, the door closing cleanly behind her. No pause, no record. I wonder if she feels it, a brief pull with no object passing through her body, untranslated. Or if she moves forward untouched, no echo, no body remembering for her.
Yeah, Veronica, I really thought that the lack of punctuation was really effective in making this feel more haunting too. And I know normally, you don't omit punctuation and everything too. So I thought it was really effective, your choice to do that here.
Thank you.
Yeah, another powerful poem. Thanks so much for sharing
Thanks.
Thanks.
that. Yeah, it was Veronica Tucker with Counterfactual with Milk. Let's go next to Christiana Doucette.
Hello.
Hi, Christiana.
Hey, Christiana. Yeah.
I went with more of a collective look at this, and I was thinking about, I live in South Carolina, so something that's affected the South just in general a lot, and even our area, is kudzu and the planting of kudzu and how that changes things. So I looked at how that choice could have looked differently. And as I was looking at the history of it, kudzu was planted on purpose here because of the Dust Bowl happening. They purposefully tried to retain the dirt that was being dried up and blown away by the drought. And in a lot of areas it didn't work, but in the places where people didn't mow, it just went wild. And, we have the South is known for kudzu now.
Right.
So this is Without Kudzu, an essay in ottava rima. We planted it on purpose in the South. $8 an acre to stop red dirt blowing in the wind, desperate for the drought to stop, the dust to settle, threadbare shirts bent over ditches planting each green sprout. This New Deal to stop the bleed might avert the acrid famine crumbling family farms. We planted vines to mitigate the harm. The hungry cows devoured scraps of green before the vines grew crowns. But by old roads where no one bothered much, and in between town proper and the mill where no one mowed, young stems dug deep and spread wide leaves to screen what they had tapped. Wood vines widened, elbowed over our stone walls. They twisted up trees, reaching for sun with each tendril's soft squeeze. There are always those who thrive near power, those ones who don't care who the change has stung. Bees honeycombed the purple of the flowers, drawn by the fizzy floral grape that sprung, and what was once ground cover grew to tower, hug, rustled into headlock. The kudzu hung a monarch's emerald robe, and then a shroud. Beneath the heavy weight of it, we bowed. But what if we had never fallen for the miracle retainer of red clay? The land's disintegration might have worn the dogwood and the pawpaws green to gray. Bones might have been unburied and restored when finally rain had washed the dust away. Quick loss of soil, then quickening at the heart, but no invasive vines to stunt fresh starts.
Well, Christiana, I thought that was a really fascinating metaphor for so many things, to express it like that. Like it was willingly planted, and I learned a lot in that poem and found it. I can definitely see why you were inspired to write about that, having learned about it and everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And what is the form? I've never seen this before, an ottava rima. We kind of heard the rhyme scheme, but what are the rules for that? I don't know.
I believe it's A B A B A B C C A B A B A B C C. So eight line.
Gotcha. So that's
so you have the octave.
Wow, that's
very
really
cool.
neat.
Yeah, really, always cool to see new forms.
Yeah, definitely.
So thanks for sharing that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Christiana Doucette with Without Kudzu.
An essay.
In ottava rima, yeah, a whole bunch of stuff going on.
Also, could be the title of an opera. I feel like it sounds like it could be.
Okay, and let's see. Last but not least, certainly, we're going to read a poem by Ted Bernal Guevara for the first time in a bit. So glad to be able to do that. Ted, of course, is a longtime studious fan of the show. He's always here.
Poster in our lovely Facebook group.
Yeah,
Rattlecast prompts.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And Ted, isn't able to read and join the Zoom, so we have a tradition of reading the poem for him. And his poem.
And so now we read his poem too, with of course considering all the other prompts.
Exactly. Yep.
And I'm very excited. I really enjoyed this one. So, yep.
Yeah. So here we go. And his poem this week was Cedar. So here we go. Cedar. In the drawer, I get lost. For the wood grain once enticed me to be a carpenter, humble, wise, and hands-on. I could see the waves and the swirls inside. They seem hollow. There's room. I can plunge my handful of words and save them here just in case my carpentry doesn't take off. Nails can be unforgiving, too, if they don't hit the mark. They're into deep once the hammer comes to its senses and returns to its pulling mood. And the saw can't reverse and add on to the wood. Cut shavings have fallen and have graced the floor. Another untouched canvas urging my finger to draw on further choices, not smooth as paper or as flat, but there is contention for creative words to come out in the open. But chisel I still want to do. How else can cedar astound the air with its lovely exhale? It is the heart that needs convincing. One can still hammer and pull, push and shave, write and erase, but to bottle that aroma and infuse it in our work clothes, it has to be long-lasting and kept in the drawer. It's kind of Ars Poetica there from Ted.
Yeah, definitely. I love the way the scent of cedar really lingers and ebbs and flows throughout this poem. And I also, imagining the inside of a drawer. Like, is there anything, more wonderful really to put in a poem than inside of a drawer, where a poem is the inside of some drawer? So I thought it was really wonderful.
Yeah, very cool poem. Thanks so much, Ted, for sharing that. It was Ted Bernal-Guevara once again with Cedar. And that's going to wrap up the invited prompt lines for tonight. Let's close out, Katie, with a little bit of haiku.
A little bit of
haiku. And what do you have for us as your haiku this week?
Another Dozier-ku.
Another Dozier-ku. Okay.
Holding the door open, history.
Very interesting. So explain to us a little bit, for people who aren't familiar, how the Dozier-ku functions, because we've talked about this a few times on the show.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
So I use the brackets to imply you can read it both ways. You can read it without what's inside, and it sort of like introduces the idea of the omission of what's inside. So you could read this as holding the door open, history, or you could read this as holding history. And then you sort of have like the lingering effect of the door being open behind you. So.
Yeah, well, very cool. It's a very echoey kind of form
Thank you.
In that format. Yeah.
Do you have a Dozier-ku?
I have never done it.
When are you going to do a Dozier-ku, bro? Come on, man. No, it is not. Many people have proven it because they write them, and I like them better than my own. Carla Schwartz has written many a Dozier-ku. Let's just say
too soon kind of things. Anyway, I have a mono-ku. This is actually just pulled from my Hyben, but I wrote it today, so it's like this week.
All right, cheater-ku.
It's not a cheater-ku. You did that like 2 weeks ago.
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
Oh, I don't think so.
I thought you did.
From what I haven't published or shared anyway.
Well, anyway.
Anyway, okay.
Whatever. Well, this is my...
You wrote it. That's not
I
up for
wrote
debate.
it.
Okay.
There we go. What's left scattered, Riverstone. There you go. That's one little mono-ku there. What's left, scattered, Riverstone. That is my haiku for this week, and that is the show for this week. Now, next week's prompt is going to be what, Katie?
We are going to write a poem that uses the present tense as one of the ways in which it creates tension. So I have been thinking a lot about this, how, it's pretty unusual to write a poem in present tense, and it does create tension, which is something I picked up from Roberta Beery and her talking a lot about that. And once she edited one of my Hyben and said, I really think this should be in present tense, and the immediacy it can give us. And then also finding other ways to create tension in poems. Tension is such a really effective storytelling tool, really utilized in movies and everything we think about in books. But we can have more of that in our poems, I think, too.
Yeah.
Doesn't need to be an easy ride.
Exactly. Yeah, other kinds of writers talk so much about tension.
Yeah, we really
and poets really don't talk about it much. So it's
but
cool
we're going to talk about it a lot all week.
It's going to be tense.
It's going to be intense, guys.
All right. So that's the prompt for next week. And next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Alan Shapiro. Now, Alan Shapiro, one of my favorite poets, he was on the guest about 2 years ago on the Rattlecast episode, 242 maybe. So Alan's got a new book, Diver, that just came out, and we're going to be talking about that and spending another evening with Alan Shapiro.
I'm excited about that. I love Alan Shapiro, too.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those, like, sometimes I get in these moods where I'm sick of poetry, and then I just crack open a book by Alan, and it reminds me that I like poetry, and then I like poetry again.
Or if you ask somebody what poets they like and they list Alan Shapiro, I'm like, that is my person.
That's true. Yeah. So, Alan, great poet, and he's going to be the guest next week, Rattlecast number 340. Your prompt, once again, write a poem that uses present tense as one of the ways in which it creates tension. Rattlecast number 340, the regular time, Monday, April 27th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week in the meantime. Good night.
Good night.